We're here for day 2. I hope you were listening yesterday to our story about Peter Rabbit. Today, Peter is going to be hanging out with he's his cousin, Benjamin Bunny. And I'm sorry to say that some more mischief kind of takes place again today. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as you enjoyed the last one. So today is The Tale of Benjamin Bunny, and it's by Beatrix Potter. I love talking about her and her loving animals. Today we're outside and we're over at camp, and usually you see a lot of little animals here, squirrels and things, and I've seen a couple of those today, but it's also a little damp and rainy, so not as many as usual. But I bet this would have been a great place for Beatrix Potter to have gotten some inspiration for these animals in her stories. Let's see what happens. One morning, a little rabbit sat on a bank. He pricked his ears and listened to the trit-trot of a pony. A gig was coming along the road. It was driven by Mr. McGregor, and beside him sat Mrs. McGregor in her best bonnet. As soon as they had passed, little Benjamin Bunny slid down into the road and set off with a hop, a skip, and a jump to call upon his relations who lived in the wood at the back of Mr. McGregor's garden. Wonder who he's going to see. That wood was full of rabbit holes, and in the neatest, sandiest hole of all lived Benjamin's aunt and his cousins, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Old Mrs. Rabbit was a widow. She earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffetees. I once bought one at a fair in a bazaar. She also sold herbs and rosemary tea and rabbit tobacco, which now we call lavender. So you can see all that stuff hanging in her house there, all the different things that she would sell. Little Benjamin did not very much want to see his aunt. He came round the back of the fir tree and nearly tumbled upon the top of his cousin, Peter. And you kind of see Peter sticking out there a little bit. Peter was sitting by himself. He looked poorly and was dressed in a red cotton pocket handkerchief. "Peter," said little Benjamin in a whisper, "who's got your clothes?" Peter replied, "The scarecrow in Mr. McGregor's garden," and described how he had been chased about the garden and had dropped his shoes and coat. Little Benjamin sat down beside his cousin and assured him that Mr. McGregor had gone out in a gig and Mrs. McGregor also, and certainly for the day because she was wearing her best bonnet. A bonnet is like a hat, and she was wearing her best one because they were going out. Peter said he hoped that it would rain. At this point, old Mrs. Rabbit's voice was heard inside the rabbit hole calling, "Cottontail! Cottontail! Fetch me some chamomile." Peter said he thought he might feel better if he went for a walk. They went away hand in hand and got upon the flat top of the wall at the bottom of the wood. From here they looked down into Mr. McGregor's garden. Peter's coat and shoes were plainly to be seen upon the scarecrow, topped with an old tam-o'-shanter of Mr. McGregor's. Little Benjamin said, "It spoils people's clothes to squeeze under the gate. The proper way to get in is to climb down a pear tree." Peter fell down head first, but it was of no consequence, as the bed below was newly raked and quite soft. So he fell out of the tree, but luckily there was something under there, so it softened his fall. It had been sown with lettuces. They left a great many odd little footmarks all over the bed, especially little Benjamin, who was wearing clogs. Clogs are like those little shoes that he is wearing. Little Benjamin said the first thing to be done was to get back Peter's clothes, and they might be able to use the pocket handkerchief for something. They took them off the scarecrow. There had been rain during the night. There was water in the shoes, and the coat was somewhat shrunk. Benjamin tried on the tam-o'-shanter, but it was too big for him. The tam-o'-shanter is that hat. Isn't that a funny-looking hat? Would you like to wear a hat like that? I'm not sure that I would like that. But he tried it on. It was a little too big, though. Then he suggested that they should fill the pocket handkerchief with onions as a little present for his aunt. Peter did not seem to be enjoying himself. He kept hearing noises. Maybe he's remembering yesterday. Benjamin, on the contrary, was perfectly at home and ate a lettuce leaf. He said that he was in the habit of coming to the garden with his father to get lettuces for their Sunday dinner. So they would come take stuff for their Sunday dinner from Mr. McGregor's garden. The name of little Benjamin's papa was old Mr. Benjamin Bunny. The lettuces were certainly fine. Peter did not eat anything. He said he would like to go home. Presently, he dropped half of the onions. Little Benjamin said that it was not possible to get back up the pear tree with a load of vegetables. He led the way boldly towards the other end of the garden. They went along a little walk on planks under a red, sunny brick wall. The mice sat on their doorsteps cracking cherry stones and winked at Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin Bunny. They're the mice, aren't they cute? Presently, Peter let the pocket handkerchief go again. There go those onions. Oh, my goodness. They got amongst flower pots and frames and tubs. Peter heard noises worse than ever. His eyes were as big as lollipops. He was a step or two in front of his cousin when he suddenly stopped. This is what those little rabbits saw around the corner. Do you think little rabbits like cats? Not sure about that. Little Benjamin took one look, and then in half a minute less than no time, he hid himself and Peter and the onions underneath a large basket. So look where they are hidden. Oh, goodness. There's that large basket, and under there are 2 rabbits and a bunch of onions. I don't know if you know this, but if you're around onions, sometimes if your mom or dad are cutting onions, then their eyes might water like they're crying because of the way those onions smell. The cat got up and stretched herself and came and sniffed the basket. Perhaps she liked the smell of onions. Anyway, she sat down upon the top of the basket. She sat there for 5 hours. Okay, guys, you come to school, let's say around 8:30. So 9:30, 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30. So that is like after lunch. So for that long, the cat sat on top of the basket, and inside the basket are Peter, Benjamin, and onions. Not a really good place to be. I cannot draw you a picture of Peter and Benjamin underneath the basket because it was quite dark and because the smell of onions was fearful. It made Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin cry. The sun got round behind the wood and it was quite late in the afternoon, but still the cat sat on top of the basket. At length there was a pitter-patter from bits of mortar fell from the wall above. The cat looked up and saw old Mr. Benjamin Bunny. Now remember, we said that was Benjamin Bunny's dad. And he's up there looking for his son. He was smoking a pipe of rabbit tobacco and he had a little switch in his hand. He was looking for his son. Old Mr. Bunny had no opinion whatever of cats. He took a tremendous jump off the wall and on top of the cat, knocked it off the basket, kicked it into the greenhouse, scratching off a handful of fur. The cat was too much surprised to scratch him back. Kind of looks like Mr. Benjamin Bunny won that one. When old Mr. Bunny had driven the cat into the greenhouse, he locked the door. Then he came back to the basket and took out his son, Benjamin, by the ears and spanked him with a little switch. Then he took out his nephew, Peter. Then he took out the handkerchief of onions and marched out of the garden. They don't look very happy, do they? I think they should not have gone into the garden. When Mr. McGregor returned about a half an hour later, he observed several things which perplexed him, so they made him really wonder. He's thinking, what? It looked as though some person had been walking all over the garden in a pair of clogs, only the footprints were too ridiculously little. Also, he could not understand how the cat could have managed to shut herself up inside the greenhouse, locking the door from the outside. When Peter got home, his mother forgave him because she was so glad to see that he had found his shoes and coat. Cottontail and Peter folded up the pocket handkerchief, and old Mrs. Rabbit strung up the onions and hung them from the kitchen ceiling with the bunches of herbs and the rabbit tobacco. So she put the onions up there. So I guess she did get something out of it this time. And she was probably very thankful that he did find his clothes. Now, we've had the verse for letter C that says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." That was a long time ago, but we talk about that verse. I really don't think that Peter Rabbit and Benjamin Bunny were very obedient to their parents. Do you? Oh, goodness. All right, so that is our story for today. We will have another story tomorrow, and this one will be about Mrs. Tittlemouse. Mrs. Tittlemouse is just the cutest little mouse you've ever seen, and she does not like a mess. So, I'll see you tomorrow.